Hello and welcome to another edition of EntheoRadio, where we talk about shamanism, psychedelics, and altered states for healing. This is your host, Capt Hugh T Alkemi, also known as Trevar. I have a very special guest today, and I'm super excited about our show as it proceeds into Facebook live formats, YouTube.com. You can find us in EntheoRadio on YouTube. You can find us across every form of podcast media except iTunes. Sorry, not there yet. But we're super excited about Spotify. You can find us on Castbox, Google, all forms of wonderful ways to listen to the show now. Remember, it's EntheoRadio Radio. I'm going to introduce our friend Isaac. Isaac, say hello.
Hello, thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, Isaac and I have been friends a really long time. We've learned and developed from each other's presence in each other's lives. So here's Isaac's bio. Isaac A Boatright, also known as Ehekatonalli, has been described as a healer, an alchemist, a sorcerer, and more, but he sees himself primarily as a mystic and a practitioner of Nahualism, which we'll explain later. He's currently active as an author, teacher, healer, and a massage therapist in Eugene, Oregon, in the Whitaker district. His first book, which we'll be discussing today, was released in 2019. This book is called Adventures in Meditation, The Power of Heart Presence. Welcome to the show, Ehekatonalli, Isaac.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to be here, and I know it can be a lot of fun talking about my book and everything around it. I love your work, so yes, it's an honor to be here.
We've had so many conversations over the years that if they had been recorded, could have been their own set of shows and their own title and strange. I don't know. What do you give me a good guess at a title for all the weird conversations we've had on the phone over the years?
Adventures in Otherness. I don't know.
Yeah, otherworldly talks. So, let's start with that book because that's the most recent thing on our hearts and a beautiful expression that you gave to the world.
Yeah, my book just came out after a year and a half of work. A few months ago, I published it myself through Lulu and Amazon. It's called Adventures in Meditation, The Power of Heart Presence. And I started teaching meditation in person about 2 years ago, and this book came out of that. It describes 16 original meditations that allow the practitioner to develop and use the intelligence and the power of the heart and the belly, basically the core of the body here. Because the heart and the belly as organs are actually organs of cognition and perception, but they're largely neglected in the modern way of relating to the self and to energy and relating to what is supposedly real. So yeah, that's my book, and basically the thrust of it is to connect people with their inner power, to empower them and connect them with a source of really peace and abundance and happiness that they already have, but it's just like to uncover that.
Excellent. And then there's this touch on your bio about Nahualism. Is that included in the book? And what is that for listeners who are just hearing that word?
It's absolutely included in the book. And what is Nahualism? It's a great question. The Nahual actually has a lot of different meanings, but one of the meanings of the Nahual is our body that we have when we're dreaming and when we're dead. It's like our energetic double, our complement. So that's one way to look at it is that Nahualism is the study and development of our energetic double and our dreaming self, which has implications far beyond just the tiny island of what is considered reality by modern perspective. There's a lot of lineages of Nahualism too, and I am part of the Tol lineage of Nahualism. And my main teacher in that lineage is Sergio Magana, and he's a healer from Mexico.
Excellent. And so give us the origin of the language of that word, or what language is it in?
Yes. It's from the language Nahuatl, Nahuatl, and this is in the Uto-Aztecan family of languages, and Nahuatl was spoken all the way from Nicaragua to Alaska at one point.
Wow.
Yeah, there's about 3 million people, I think, who speak Nahuatl now in Mexico, and actually it's a language that is really coming back. A lot of people are learning it in California particularly. I keep seeing some really cool things on my Instagram. In fact, just yesterday, after we talked last night, I found this video where someone was telling a story in Nahuatl. And I love it. It's a beautiful, powerful language. So the word Nawal in Nahuatl, I kind of go into what it means in the book, but let me just try to say here that it's kind of like who I am really, and that which can be extended. So we really are more our inner self than our outer self, because our outer self comes from our inner self as it is extended.
Excellent.
And Nahualism teaches that we dream it first, and then we experience it. So our dreams are not so much programmed by what we see in the day. I mean, they are a little bit, but they are creative. So we dream something, and then it's not literal. It's in a language of dreaming, of the Sipak Nawali. From there, the dream expands through our bones, into our blood, and then into our flesh and into the world.
So some of this material was touched on by the Castaneda series, yes? The Carlos Castaneda series?
Yeah, and I've read all the Castaneda books. It's important to note that his later books are very different from his earlier books.
Huh.
A lot of people have only read the earlier books and think of those. And there's nothing wrong with those earlier books, but the later ones are quite different. Castaneda was a very controversial figure. I tried to meet him. I went to a couple of workshops that his cohorts, his associates were giving. Carol Teagues was there at one of them. Taisha Abelar was also there. And then the so-called Chacmos, these three women who were teaching the magical passes. So I went to a workshop in Longmont, Colorado a long time ago in the 90s, and also in the 90s one in San Diego, and I learned magical passes, special movements. And what they said is that these magical passes, people learn them while they're in altered states, like eating a bunch of mushrooms, or in a lucid dream. Both of those kind of situations is where they would come upon these different movements. Then they would reproduce them in their waking state to create the energy and feeling of those altered states. So it's a really brilliant thing. And his lineage of Nahualism is different from the Toll lineage. His books aren't really all that helpful as far as practical application for most people. But I did practice and have practiced things from those books since a couple of decades ago. The recapitulation and the magical passes, things like that. And they've served me well, but the Toll lineage I find to be far more alive, put it that way.
Excellent. So that maybe gives our listeners some furniture to grasp on where this dialogue's coming from, what people in the past have experienced with, I guess, Mesoamerican style shamanism, or some of the indigenous forms of shamanism that were here before conquistadores and Columbian eras.
Absolutely. Yes, the whole tradition has been really underground since then, and the world has changed a lot, and now it's time for the teachings to come back out and to blossom, and that's really happening with people rediscovering them and learning them. And the time is right. We're in a big change of the ages. I think many people see that and know that. Many cultures talk about that. And in the Toltec worldview, if you look at the Aztec calendar, it gives us these different ages, which are called suns, like S-U-N. And we're ending one sun right now and beginning another one. In Sergio Magaña's excellent book, Dawn of the Sixth Sun, he gives a lot of good information about that. Basically, it's from 2012 to 2021. We're in the midst of a huge transformation, and it was prophesied, it was said by Cuauhtémoc that, it was said by him, anyways, it was said that everyone would die, which doesn't necessarily mean literal death, because dying also means we die every night when we fall asleep, right? You really die in a way, and you become in this whole different life. You go into this whole other world. So one interpretation of that is that everyone will learn to dream. And that's part of what I'm getting at with my book, The Power of Heart Presence, because when we activate our heart, we can bring together our body here, the tonal, the daily awareness, and our nawal, which is centered in the navel, and have dreaming awake, where we're dreaming awake when we are in the world now, and we're also lucid dreaming when we're asleep.
Right. So I kind of want to dive into that subject a little bit more, but I want to go back to the dreaming stuff first, because I feel like that's very pertinent.
Okay.
Like at some point, I would love to talk about the ages and the way time moves and how consciousness shifts in these different ages. But I really feel it's important to kind of give people maybe a little bit more background, whether it's with our relationship or things we've mutually experienced, or how the teachings that you're sharing with the world have affected the greater community in Oregon and even here on this podcast through myself. I attended a class. I think it was called like the Art of Lucid Dreaming with you. What was it called? Do you remember?
I believe it was just called the art.
The Art of Dreaming. And that was the most fascinating material that I've experienced on the subject of lucid dreaming since I was like 10 or 11 years of age. And I was studying that subject when I was 10 or 11 years of age. Would you share with the listeners a few things about that class and what people would hope to learn and experience as a result from attending that class?
Absolutely. I was teaching this class the novelist art of planting and canceling dreams and teaching people how to know when to cancel a dream. So I taught about the language of dreams. And it's possible to decide what you're going to dream and plant that dream through different breathing exercises. And then you dream it. And then after you dream it, you get to experience it in your life. Because as I was saying before, dreams are creative. We're dreaming things before we experience them. And when I first learned about this in depth, I thought, is that really so true? I mean, I saw dreams already as a hatch into other worlds and, you know, a veritable realm of exploration that's infinite. But then once I learned about the language of dreams and started to really look at my dreams in that way, the evidence was undeniable. For example, my grandmother passed on, but before she passed on, she came to me in a dream, and because I knew the language of dreams, I saw very clearly, oh, my grandmother is about to die. And, you know, it just dawned on me when I woke up and I was really analyzing the dream. I thought, okay. And I called my parents, and they were like, yes, how did you know? Because she had been getting sick for a long time, as often happens when people are in their 80s. And, you know, sometimes it's even exhausting for families when they keep hearing that a family member is about to die, but they're hanging on for like years. Anyways, I didn't wish for her to die, but I knew she was suffering. I told my parents, yes, she came to me in a dream, and I knew from the dream. And they said, yeah, we are fairly certain that she is going to die soon. And then I had another dream that totally confirmed it, called her up and got a chance to talk to her on probably like the last day or last 2 days of her life. And it was very sweet, you know, so the dreams really did communicate with me very clearly. So there's understanding the language of dreams, and then seeing when you're having a dream that's going to create something that you don't want to have in your life, and learning how to burn that dream. I only teach the art of dreaming once in a while. It's not my main thing to teach, actually, because my teacher, Sergio Magana, still teaches that. So mainly let him do that. But I want people in my area to have access to this knowledge. It would be a shame not to pass some of it on. So, you know, I do my part.
Yeah. There was some, there's another fascinating way of using the word Nawal, and it's about like animal spirits. Everyone talks about power animals in shamanism, or totem spirits and animal totems. And so after learning some of that material from your teacher and as passed on through that class as you were a teacher, I really felt a reawakening of my power animal and my relationship to animal spirits. Tell our audience more about that third, or I don't want to call it a third way of talking about the novel. Is that right? Is it the second or the third way of talking about it?
I don't know. Yeah, second or third. I'd love to talk about that. I love the Nawals. So the practice, now let me just back up on the word Nawal a little bit. It's actually used sometimes as an insult and a slur in Mexico. So like because of colonization, there are a lot of people who the word Nawal to them is like a bad word that you call someone saying they're an evil sorcerer. And if you look up the definition of Nahualism and Nawal online, you get some pretty funny definitions. I mean, they're kind of sad too. That Nahualism is the belief that certain people can transform into animals. And then people will use Nawal towards someone to imply that at night maybe they turn into a jaguar and go and kill people or something.
All right.
So that's kind of a product of the colonial thing. You know how when cultures take over, they'll demonize the older culture. I'm not saying people can't transform into animals. I'm totally like pro that. I think that's really awesome. But we use the term Nawal to refer to the intelligence and power and like spirits of different animals. And we plant dreams with different Nawals, depending on what we need to create in our life. So for healing, you plant dreams with snake. And for wisdom, you can plant the dream with snake too. And the snake has a venom that can heal, and it can also kill. So it can kill the disease inside of you. And our blood is a lot like a snake going through our body, it's seen that way. So we work with the blood serpent in some practices. And yeah, so we plant dreams with all kinds of different Nawals. There's owl, and there's deer, and there's jaguar, and there's spider, and there's coyote, and there's just like so many. And eagle. Eagle's a great one. And flower, there are plant ones too. So yeah, Nawal in that sense are like spirits, you know, kind of roughly analogous to how in some other traditions you call on different spirits and work with them to create things in your life.
Right. Or even maybe deities or lesser deities like in Hindu pantheon, or different Buddhas like bodhisattvas and Buddhas that are on medicine Buddha, for example.
Yes. And a lot of people think that that the Toltecs are into deities and, you know, that they have certain gods or even demons or whatever. But actually, we call them the essences that we call them. So we don't see it as like gods, as much as forces, intelligent forces that you can relate to, even on a personal level, which is awesome, but not really gods.
Very nice. Very nice. So, where to go next? I want to talk about the concept of lucid dreaming as an altered state of consciousness. Maybe you can speak to altered states, psychedelics, and mind expanding as well as mind contracting experiences in the form of nightmares and bad trips. I know you have a really, like, we've talked so much about this. I don't know if I want to preclude any specific thing. Just go in the direction you feel like going to start off this subject, and if you can, relate it to dreaming.
Okay, yeah, I do have a background with entheogens and with the poison path. I've experimented pretty extensively with ingesting not only psychedelics, but other related kind of alterative compounds, even a lot of different kind of mineral compounds too. Sometimes insects, a lot of different things like that. I've just really been an explorer of consciousness. I felt driven that way. And I think we're all driven to expand our consciousness in different ways. I think it's just part of being alive. It's like intrinsic, and it's not just a human thing. You can see animals doing this too. Sometimes I see animals engaging in very unusual behavior, and you know, they're doing something to expand their awareness, their consciousness, get a different view. So dreaming is something I just love ever since I was young, and I guess I've been pretty gifted with vivid dreams, because a lot of people that I talk to are like, oh, I don't remember my dreams. And a lot of people don't even seem to value their dreams or find dreams interesting, which I find perplexing. But if they don't remember them, I guess they're not really much of a presence in their life. But if we are dreaming and then experiencing in our life what we dreamed, if you don't remember your dreams and you can't work with them, you're like a zombie. You're the walking dead. That's what we say in our tradition. And it's harsh. But, you know, we have to work with the dreams. And it's not just the dreaming that we do when we're asleep, because we're dreaming awake all the time too. Like when you have a daydream and you just start imagining something, you are dreaming. And it is creative. You're inviting that into your life. You're inviting even more precisely the essence of how you're feeling as you're doing that. So, you know, it's all about not just lucid dreaming, but lucid living. And what I found after many years is that the heart is this really powerful portal to connect with something so much greater. I hesitate to call it like the higher self, or a lot of times I say spirit, which is a very broad term. But the way I actually experience it is that when I really can focus into my heart and become centered there, like I actually bring myself, my awareness into my heart more and more, I'm in contact with something totally transcendental. And it's not separate from me, but it is different from me. And so there's like this portal that opens up to infinity is how I would say it. Actually, that's probably one of the better descriptions I could give for it. And I don't feel like I'm special that way, that it's just something I can do. Like, you know, everyone has this. It's intrinsic to being a being that exists and is alive. So it's not just humans, it's trees, and I don't know how they, like, you know, what part of them is their heart. But insects, everything that exists is like tapped into this. So this is a huge shift for me in terms of the heart consciousness. I started meditating on the heart, and within a few weeks, I had a really profound spiritual awakening experience that totally transformed my personality and my character. And I tell that story in the book. But yeah, that was after a lot of experimentation for a long time. And somehow I hadn't really, like, it's just right there, really obvious, the heart right in the center. And I'm talking about the heart chakra as well as the physical heart. There's a lot of cool new science that has been done about the heart and about the belly that show that they are perceptive and cognitive. The Heart Math Institute has a lot of good material about the heart and heart coherence. So I hope that was a pretty coherent answer.
Totally. Well, it tried to span a lot of subjects. So I'm gonna break it down. In your bio, you mentioned you were an alchemist. Tell me about that specifically, and maybe since you've already precluded, you've taken some strange minerals and maybe poisons and things like that. Talk about alchemy specifically in the physical forms that you've experienced it in your lifetime.
Sure, yeah. Alchemy is like re-enchantment of the world. It's amazing. So sorry. Yeah, alchemy is like re-enchantment of the world. Amazing. And I was very blessed to work with an alchemist couple here in Eugene that used to live here. I was actually turned on to alchemy during a raw food phase. I was doing all raw food for about a year. The first 6 months of which were very blissful and helpful, and the second 6 months of which I was just kind of declining. But anyhow, I learned about alchemy from David Wolf. He's such a character.
Oh, yeah.
And he taught me how to ormus, which is beautiful. Yeah, and he was making this. I was in Hawaii on this permaculture design course thing, and David Wolf demonstrated to us how to make ormus from seawater. And I've shown you how to do it. We've done it together. We've made ormus.
Yeah.
And I could feel the energy when he was doing that, and I could see the energy too. There was a blue light around the ormus when it was finished, and he was finishing the washing of the ormus. And we just gave it to plants. I didn't ingest any of it. But I came home from Hawaii back to Oregon, and I figured out how to make it with a lot of errors along the way. It took me a lot of determination. So ormus is an example of a mineral elixir that really changes your consciousness and builds you up, but in a very different way than psychedelics. It's really long-term and cumulative and sustainable. Psychedelics, as we know, you have this really intense experience, and then you come down, and for a lot of people, it's a question: can you integrate that? Right. Can you make that? Can you integrate those lessons and bring them forward? And that is where the heart presence work comes in too. It is about integrating those things, which is not so much a mental activity. The mind is really kind of a tedious tool to use for a lot of these things, and that's partly why people love psychedelics. Is it helps them to get out of their mind, use their mind in a different way. For sure, but there are a lot of other ways to do that. So alchemy is a real thing. It's been around for a very long time, and I worked with this alchemist couple briefly. I mean, I say I worked with them, but it was more like they taught me a few things, and I would come over and hang out with them, and we did a few things together. And they were brilliant. I'm talking about Alchemy, Alqemi. They have a website online, and they sell amazing spagyrics. And Paul Barcher and Micah Nielsen are their names, the couple. So Paul had figured out how to extract the oil of gold. I don't know if you've ever heard of oil of gold.
I have, yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if any of our viewers have. There's another alchemist.
Something really popular now, yeah.
Yeah, there's another alchemist named Avery Hopkins making it in New Mexico, and his oil of gold is fantastic. So shout out to him.
He's got a really good Instagram advertisement now. Yeah, I hope we catch Avery on the show soon. I've watched some of the videos, and I enjoy the material you forward from me, or from him to me?
Yeah. And so the oil of gold is made with gold. It doesn't actually have metallic gold in it, but it carries the power, the intelligence, and the life force of gold into an organic medium so that we can absorb it into our own body. And gold is the metal of the sun, so it enhances our solar consciousness. Similarly, there's an oil of silver that carries energy of the moon, and there's an oil of tin and an oil of copper. So these are pretty amazing things that fortunately we have not lost. And the alchemists figured out how to do this because they were looking at the life force, the intelligence of the metals, the evolution of the metals. They're approaching minerals and metals as living things. And it's a whole different paradigm than chemistry.
That's a really powerful way to approach life in general. Everything is a living thing. The table, the microphone.
Absolutely.
You just talked earlier about the heart consciousness, or the heart aspect of a tree, and I'm like, well, that's funny. We have a thing in English. We say heartwood.
Yes.
It's the middle of the tree, right? The heartwood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the term heart is used in so many interesting ways across cultures. At the heart of it all, and I didn't have the heart to do that.
Right.
There's so many interesting ways that's used. And when someone says, if you say, who am I or who are you to someone, they don't say, my name is Ehekatonalli, and point to their head. If they would say, I am Ehekatonalli, pointing to their heart. I find that so interesting.
Great. So that's a great segue. What does this word mean? Ehekatonalli. Some people call you that. I've adjusted my life to call you that. And it's fun to say it and pronounce it. And it feels lively. It's different than the vibe of Isaac. What's Ehekatonalli? So
this is my Nahuatl name that I received in Mexico. And it's based on my birth as calculated in the Nahualism version of the Aztec calendar. So the Aztec calendar has 20 different glyphs that repeat and 13 different numbers. And there are also other influences that come in. And a man in Mexico named Xolotl, Xolotl, helped me with this. And he's one of my teacher's teachers, one of Sergio's teachers. And I chose the name and then received it in a magical way. Ehekat is wind, and tonali has a few different translations. It's kind of like the energy, the cosmic energy that comes from the sun that makes things grow. And so, and wind, Ehekat, is the messenger. So one way that I interpret my name is that I am the messenger of energy. I'm the messenger of the heart energy to share this with people, with my book and my teachings. Right. And when I learned my name, it changed my life. It really changed me. There was an energetic shift that happened very quickly and has been very profound. Absolutely. I remember when you started using that, or at least when you introduced me to the fact that you were using that now, and that was definitely an energetic change I felt psychically. And I also want to point out for our listeners, if you're not watching, Isaac is gesturing at his chest a lot, and the way we were talking about heart and the concept of sun, he like put his hand on his chest over his heart when he said the messenger of the sun, and we pointed at ourselves when we were pointing at our chest. The coronary, right? The coronary bypass, corona, it's all the energy of the sun, right? Right. Heart. It refers to the heart, coronary. So it's so fun how these things are connected in our consciousness, and we only subtly feel the effects when we don't pay attention and think of our ancient cultures and the integrations that they've had consciously to get us to this point. Absolutely. So I'd like to also just add that Toltec culture is very old. It's ancient. Right. Tell me more. The Toltec culture that I know and that I'm part of is an oral tradition. So people aren't going to find very much solid information. You'll find a lot of disinformation when you go online and try to learn about it. So what I've learned, the healing practices that I practice and the dreaming practices, they come from an oral tradition that's very ancient. If you ask, educated anthropologists these days, they wouldn't have the same answer that the oral tradition gives, and it's at least, I think, at least 50,000 years old, which sounds kind of crazy, but I believe the oral tradition, and the reason I believe it is because all of the practices have been so powerful in my life and so beautiful, and it's just a whole different paradigm, So I just wanted to add that in there. It seemed like a good time.
Yeah, definitely. The culture is so much older than our Western civilization and anthropology wants to suggest that it is. And we're finding independent anthropologists who are discovering and putting out evidence that is more in alignment with things that you're discussing and that maybe were passed down in that oral way. I remember you said something about the treasure when the conquistadores, they came to invade and take over the civilizations that were here in the Western worlds, Mesoamerica and North America. There was this concept you described as hide our treasure, and you described this form of Nahualism or something as the real treasure. Can you tell that story?
Yeah, let me say a bit about that. So there was a lot of gold and a lot of jade, which I think was valued even more than gold in what is now called Mexico at that time. A lot. And, the conquistadors were thirsty for the gold. They were thirsty for the native women. They were really fucked up. And the leader of the people told everyone, let's hide our treasure. And what he meant, they hid their art, yes, and their precious things, some of them. But what he really, really meant was let's hide our tradition, our magic, our knowledge. Because obviously these people didn't understand that. They didn't have that. They couldn't understand it, the people coming over and, raping them, raping the land and all. So they did hide their knowledge, and it was prophesied by Cuauhtemoc that it would come back with the advent of the sixth sun.
Wow. And that's the time we're living in.
It is the time we're living in now. And this knowledge is transformational. I feel like anyone who loves psychedelics, loves lucid dreaming, and is very interested in consciousness expansion can gain a lot from even learning a little bit about this tradition. And really, the deeper I've gone into it, the more it gives and gives. And I do see my book, The Power of Heart Presence, as part of this tradition. It overlaps quite strongly, but it also works with more modern practices of meditation and weaves them together.
Very nice. I've got to pick up one of those. Can you sign it for me as a Ehekatonalli? Would you?
Yeah, absolutely. You want a hardcover?
Yeah, I would love one of those. I am super excited. I'm kind of reflecting on some of these practices that you've shared with me over the years, where I think maybe almost 3 years ago, you shared with me the practice about calling one's power back in. And we discussed how social media, we lose power by taking selfies and scrolling forever and stuff like that. And we talked about pulling whatever you think you're getting energetically back into your person, reintegrating it. And I thought, wow, that was such an important lesson for all of the people that are sharing our dream, our collective societal dream, to learn about. Like, where is my soul fragmenting? In shamanism, we speak to that more, but also like your power and the soul and all these concepts. Who are we really? And how are we differentiating our soul, our spiritual self through social media? And what is the ramifications of that? We don't even know. And I honestly want to say that there's a spiritual sickness out there as a result of having social media like Facebook and Instagram. And these techniques, this treasure you described, they tend to give us cures for the spiritual sickness that society is.
Yeah, and it's so much about intent, intending to call back your powers, the very beginning of that, recognizing it, of course, and intending to bring that back. There's when our attention becomes fragmented and is easily led in different directions, then we become susceptible to manipulation by outside forces.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually a theme that we're entering into in this new sun. We're going from what's called a light sun to what's called a dark sun. And light means, in the sense, like day and night. We're going from outward sun, where people pursued, and you can totally see this shift happening when I talk about this, because people have been pursuing meaning, purpose, love, etc., all from outside of themselves. And there's this huge shift where you have to get that from inside. It's very noticeable in the realm of medicine right now, because so many medicines that have been working before are not working anymore. External medicines. And these internal medicines that people have long forgotten, denied, repressed, been afraid of, demonized, etc., are actually coming back, and people are awakening to that. And that's a huge, obviously, motivation for change, a huge force, because, to get better, we have to do that, to stop suffering, to stop. There's a lot of diseases that are rampant right now that are going to be cured by going within. And yeah, taking back our power, taking back our attention, our awareness, and being able to focus. We have to see this as a challenge, an opportunity to develop discipline. Because if you look at the human race is not very advanced at all. I mean, really.
You mean the earthly human race? There could be others out there.
Yeah. I don't believe the earthly human race is very advanced. We have really some pretty cool technology, which is like, good and bad. But emotionally, we're not very advanced. Look at all these countries fighting with each other, all these people fighting each other. Look at all the hate. I mean, it's ridiculous, all the racism and like the whole squandering of resources, colonialism kind of dynamics, all these kind of things, all the like inept governmental systems that we've created, all these institutions that we created and invested power in. And then basically a lot of these institutions become these monsters that take the power that was given to them. They start usurping more power and start like using it against the people who created them. And yes, some people are involved in that, but these kind of forces is what I'm talking about that can manipulate. But as an individual, you really do have sovereignty and power. And Nahualism and heart-based meditation really don't just like promise that, they give it to us. They initiate us over and over into our own creative power and our own connection to that infinite source that I've been talking about. So I'm not here with any kind of message of fear or doomsday at all. It's actually the opposite. Like Dawn of the Sixth Sun is Sergio's book. I'm talking about the dawn of a whole different era, which is going to be quite magical and very strange compared to, what we think now, what we do now, what we think is possible, So I'm looking forward to the future. I hope to stick around for a long time.
As would any alchemist. So speaking to the other titles that you wear once in a while, and I spoke to them in your bio, what is this thing, sorcery? What is it? I mean, it's mentioned in Carlos Castaneda. You once in a while, I suppose, are called a sorcerer, even in that bio. What does that mean to be a sorcerer? And I'm precluding this isn't a bad thing. So for everyone that's like, hey, oh my gosh, they're going to talk about black magic and stuff, whatever. I just talked with someone who is out of Wales, living in Wales, and teaching about Irish, Welsh, and Cornish shamanism. And in that language, they don't have the word shaman. They have something very akin to sorcerer. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I actually have a lot of Welsh and English blood, a lot of ancestry from there. So yeah, shout out to those ancestors.
Right, yeah.
Sorcery is not bad. It's just like magic, and it's not a title that I've tried to have people call me. I mean, when I was 17, yes, but like it's not something. It's not something that I'm claiming for myself. But people don't know how to call me sometimes, so people sometimes call me a wizard or a sorcerer or things like that, and it's probably because I'm always talking about like magic and spirits and the life force in things. And a big theme for me is actually not being so human-centric. But sorcery has to do with relating directly. It's related somewhat to mysticism. So like mysticism to me is relating directly to the mysterious, to the ineffable, rather than just having like a faith-based program about it. It's about really diving in and experiencing it, and in some ways actually becoming that. And sorcery is about relating to energy and consciousness in very creative ways that open up new possibilities, is how I would define it. But you do also relate to other beings that exist, that are energy beings or inorganic beings. They don't have a body. And so relating to them, which for a lot of people I think is a very scary topic. For other people, it's something that they're very into, you know, for the magical community. Most people in the magical community, this is not weird to hear about.
Right.
But to me, they're just part of the ecosystem around us. We have nature spirits around us, you know, the fairies and the fae. All those things are rather real to me. And I'm not saying I have like a ton of experience with every kind of energy being. I don't, but I have enough that I've cultivated and relationships that I've cultivated that have helped me to grow and learn. And so people, yeah, sometimes people call me a sorcerer, and I'm fine with that. It's okay.
I think of you as a wizard because of the facial hair, really.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and that hat, you've got a wizard's hat that's pretty badass. It's good. It's if anyone ever sees Ehekatonalli's social media, in fact, this is a great time to promote your stuff. Where can people find you online and your social media?
Yes, you can find me. My website is lucidfluidity.com. It's mainly about my healing work. You can find me on Facebook, Isaac A Boatright. You can find my book on lulu.com, Lulu. You can find the hardcover there, and you can find the soft cover and the Kindle versions on Amazon.
Very
so
nice.
Yeah, check it out. I would love for my message to reach more of you.
Very nice. So I don't want to wrap up our conversation entirely, but we will come back and remind people that where you can find our gentle guest today. Ehekatonalli wanted to discuss a little bit about the psychedelics and the altered states and how these things can be processed or integrated, these visions we've had in the forms of dance or movement or perceptual practices. What does that mean, perceptual practices? Give me some understanding of how to integrate some of these altered states, please.
Yeah, let's talk about this. This is really great. We're getting to the heart of things. So, a psychedelic experience is amazing in and of itself, but what do you do after that? How do you integrate that? How do you take action, and how do you sustain the parts of it that are good? Perceptual practices give us an opportunity to do this, and they really are practices that need to be done regularly. Because every day we are reifying, we are solidifying our focus with our actions, whether we want to or not. And we're making things around us become more solid, more real, and more the way that we think of them. Perceptual practices are ways of shifting that. They're ways of inviting in new possibilities. Let me just give you an example of a simple perceptual practice that you can start right away. That's really easy and really worthwhile. As you're going about your day and you see other people around you, don't look directly at them. Look at the space right above their head, or look at the space right behind their shoulders. Look at the air there, and just don't try to see anything there, but just look there and see what happens. This practice is just a very simple perceptual practice that opens up different possibilities, and it can be kind of uncomfortable. You need to embrace that discomfort. That's really good. A lot of what we do in the path that I'm part of and what I teach is to make ourselves do things a little bit different in a strange way that invites in something else. And you have to kind of become friends with a certain odd feeling of discomfort until it feels like kind of scratching an itch. So we're really trained to see a certain reality, and it has to do with the angle of our eyes and where we focus our eyes. That creates the world that we agree is real, in quotes, Then we're all like dreaming that together. We're really just dreaming it together. And it's not just us dreaming it. The earth is dreaming us, and we're dreaming with other beings and stuff, for good or bad. It goes both ways. It's somewhat dualistic. But when we practice this perceptual skill and change the angle of our eyes and where we point our eyes, we always bring in new information. And our conscious brain might not start processing it right away, but I can tell you that your subconscious starts processing it immediately because it has never stopped processing it. So once you join with your tonal, your waking self, with this intent and start moving things, it will change the way that you dream. And so a simple practice like this, I challenge anyone who's interested to just try this for a few days throughout the day and see what happens.
I'm going to accept your challenge. I might report on it later. This is a practice that I've done off and on, and I often don't do it because of that discomfort, that little uncomfortable thing that usually occurs socially, and it will almost always derail a conversation when I adjust my perception by looking in their direction as an active listener, but not directly at their eyes. Or I'll do a lot of looking at the lips, but when you look over or past somebody, it shifts energy really rapidly for consciousness.
It does. And practice a lot at first with people that you're not actually directly relating to, but you will get you'll get other results if you're actually talking to someone and you're focusing that way. Maybe some of them will be your friends and you could tell them what you're doing.
Right.
Invite them to try it.
I don't mind telling people what I'm doing. And people will end up thinking I'm a weirdo anyways.
Well, yeah, it's good. It's good.
It's my lot in life. I think that word weird comes from one of those Celtic isles too, doesn't it?
Yeah, it just means like those that are not like us, I think.
So you didn't mention dance. How can dance be used to integrate a psychedelic experience? And I want to touch on DMT if we can, because it's such a hot topic, and I've experienced it personally, and I know you have.
Yes.
And salvia too, if we can touch on that, because those are really tough experiences to integrate for people oftentimes.
They are, and salvia has actually been one of my very best plant teachers. Salvia is wonderful. I have a live salvia plant at my house, and I just love having the live plant around. So, but let's talk about dance. So dance is something that I love dancing. I've been really into it for a long time, and I've had really powerful transformative and psychedelic experiences just from dancing. The reason that we need to dance to integrate our experiences goes back to this whole thing of how in modern society a lot of times we're just so much in our head. And the head is cool, it's fine, it's not bad, but it's just such a small part of who we are, literally and figuratively. The head embodies, it is a certain kind of cognitive center, but so is the liver, and so is the spleen, and even our joints. Every part of our body is a living cell, and each living cell has intelligence, and it has its own cognition. So when you get to like these groupings of cells with really dynamic functions, like the kidneys, they have a consciousness and they have a power, and you can really see in a lot of traditions that they've actually they've actually really understood this for a long time. Like in the Toltec tradition, and I think this is very similar in Chinese medicine, we look at the liver as a place where there can be a lot of anger and frustration, rage, hatred, and we cleanse the liver. We work with the liver to transmute those things, and the stomach as the center where there can be trauma, and the kidneys where there can be shame, guilt, and fear. The lungs can be grief, and the heart can be aging, in fact. So working with these different organs and their different intelligence, we can get different perceptions, but by dancing, we can unify our whole body and engage everything. And I'm not really talking so much about ballroom dancing. I mean, that's a pretty socialized kind of thing, right? And couples dancing that's structured. I'm talking about more like ecstatic dance. And the meaning of ecstasy is interesting. A friend of mine recently pointed out to me that ecstasy is not like just intense pleasure, but it also can be intense pain. It refers to incredible intensity of feeling. And dancing is a way that we can really let that much energy flow through our whole body. It's a way we can fling off our limitations, and we can access altered states, obviously, through dancing, just through our own biology, working with it. So yeah, I love dancing, and I encourage everyone to dance because it really awakens a part of ourselves. And some people are just like afraid to dance, or they feel like they're afraid of being judged or whatever. It doesn't matter. Dance in your living room by yourself. It doesn't have to be in a big group.
This is Ehekatonalli and Captain Hugh T Alkemi saying, "It is safe to dance."
Yes. Do it.
So let's make sure we capture every aspect of this. Salvia and DMT. Yeah. Go on with some information about salvia experiences and DMT.
Yeah, let's talk about this. They're both extremely powerful, and they have been extremely influential for me. I discovered 5-MeO DMT when I was young, and I had a lot of experiences with it. I really overdid it, which is kind of the nature of youth, right? But it taught me so much, and it put me on a quest to recreate those states, which were kind of ephemeral. It bugged me how I would access this heightened consciousness, and then I would go back. I would contract down. And I thought, how can I really reach this in a sustainable way? How can I integrate and embody these kinds of awareness, which is like the work that I'm doing now. And I don't even need DMT necessarily now. I mean, it's in my body already, right? It's in my pineal gland. But, DMT, salvia, both heavy hitters. With DMT, I learned a lot of things. I learned a lot about dying and not being afraid of death. And that's very important because our fear of death really keeps us from living, because death and life are inextricably interwoven. Even the oxygen that we breathe is also aging our bodies. It's oxidizing, burning us. And even the most healthy food has some little bit of death in it. Really, death and life are part of the same thing. And every time that we die, we come alive in a different way. In our tradition, we see that on the small scale, we die every night and we're reborn every morning, and we live a life in our dreams and we live a life when we're waking. I mean, this is very logical and obvious, but also that when we die from this life, we go into an afterlife, and then we come back into another life, etc. On, just keeps repeating on that scale as well. And you just keep growing and dealing with all the different issues that are to be worked out, and realizing all the different possibilities in this huge, huge thing that's going on. This huge dream that we're all part of. And so DMT taught me a lot about that. And with salvia, what I found with salvia is that I could go to salvia with questions and that I could get answers that no one else could give me. And they would come to me in very, very experiential, kinesthetic ways. People experience salvia in very different ways. And I'm not encouraging or discouraging entheogen use, actually. Just, it's totally up to you. You have options. But with salvia, I would get a lot of information and healing when I needed it to direct questions, which I found was amazing.
Yeah, and for me, I've experienced a lot of similar descriptions, similar things to the things you were describing there, where salvia did answer some really interesting questions. And it was almost like a telepathic kind of communication. Like there's a consciousness there. I think of her as a her. I think of it as a female energy, and
I do.
It's a little like that to me. Yep,
she's definitely female. I've had some glimpses of some kind of forms that she can take, and she's very sacred to me. So I often don't even say that much, but I will say that there are people who have a strong affinity with her, and there are people who don't. And if you find that you're one of those people who do, then you have an ally who can teach you all kinds of things that you're not going to learn necessarily otherwise very easily. Salvia has a very mysterious origin. Very little is known about her, and I find that just so fascinating.
I think we were on the phone pre-rolling this conversation, and we mentioned that she's a cultigen. Is that the right word?
Cultivar. Yeah, people. It's very rare that she makes flowers or seeds, and it's very rare that any seeds that are made would actually germinate. At least this is also my knowledge. I'm I don't pretend to be an expert on salvia, but she's a great teacher of mine. And so, like, there's 3 or 4 different plants that most people are having. You know, they're just clones.
Right.
They're all part of the same body in a way through space and time. And salvia, people with experience with salvia will know what I'm talking about. Teaches you very weird things about space and time. It shows you really different perspectives about space and time, like 360-degree vision, perpendicular gravity, you know, just like all kinds of weird stuff that I can barely describe.
Nice. Yeah, I suppose it's kind of outlandish, but I'm enjoying some of the otherworldly conversations we have. I was suggesting that if she's a cultigen, if that plant's a cultigen, maybe it came from the lost continent of Atlantis last night in our call. It's possible.
I do have a feeling that her origin is something that we can barely conceive of, at least with the modern mindset, that it's just way, way out of our small bubble of what's supposedly possible or real. I don't know. I've sometimes wondered if she's... Yeah, no, never mind. I can't say.
Right.
I wonder, you know, it's interesting you mentioned Atlantis because in the Toltec tradition, they talk about, I think this is in the Mexica tradition, it's in the book Dawn of the Sixth Sun, they talk about their origin story from a place that, like, the name of it is similar to Atlantis.
Atlan?
Atlan, exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So,
Ooh.
something to think about. Yeah. Maybe we could ask Salvia about her origin. Yeah. Whether or not we could understand the answer is another matter.
Right. But the fun thing about that, and I've had the 5-MeO DMT experience, and that everyone thinks that's the most intense psychedelic known to man, and I think salvia kind of tops that. When it's concentrated, it's and naturally occurring, it's considered the most potent psychedelic that's available to be consumed and used by earthly humans, as far as I'm aware. I think that's how it's categorized. Is that what you're aware of?
That's how I see it. And it's interesting. Salvia is legal in a lot of places. Salvinorin is legal. I mean, that's a whole other topic, this whole illegal or legal nonsense.
Right.
But yeah, salvinorin is incredibly powerful. And I mean, just the potency by weight, of course, is also ridiculously high. We're talking about micrograms. So.
Right, and it's just naturally occurring. The plant just makes it. It's not like you have to isolate it like LSD-25 from Hoffman and stuff.
Right, yeah, I don't think that's naturally occurring so far that we know of, right?
No, not. I mean, yeah, there's a big chemical process with synthesis, and salvia is just like, hey, let's do an extract and super concentrate that extract either with alcohol or otherwise.
Right. Yep.
So super fun. One more time, give everyone where they can find your wonderful social media, your safety dance, your conversations about lucid dreaming and Nahualism.
All right. I'm on Instagram as Ehekatonalli. That account is more just fun. I'm Isaac A Boatright on Facebook. That's more professional presence. And I have a website, lucidfluidity.com. Check all those out. You can find my book, Adventures in Meditation, The Power of Heart Presence, on Amazon and on Lulu.
Very nice. And this is Capt Hugh T Alkemi inviting you to find us on Facebook, facebook.com/EntheoRadio. And you can also find us under a second Facebook page, which was the original, working title, which was Shamanic Herbs and Entheogens Radio. And that's facebook.com/shamanic herbs. You can find me as the admin for Shamanic Herbs, the group on Facebook. And you can also jump on our Instagram. We have other social media, and I'm less active on Instagram and I'm less active on Twitter, but we're there. Reach out to us. come on the show, come with questions as a listener, and find us also on YouTube and subscribe if you're watching this video, and you'll get notifications for the next video if you click the bell button. Find us on Spotify and a whole bunch of other places for podcasts. This is Trevahr Hughes and Isaac A Boatright signing out today. Say bye-bye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
In Lak'ech, namaste, everyone.